Here's something we all use fairly regularly but almost never think about: software documentation. We take it for granted that there will be some kind of help resource to ease us through our first experiences with the product, especially when you're paying for the product. But how often do you actually find the help documentation you need? Conversely, how often do you find yourself giving up and moving on to a different provider because you just couldn't get started fast enough? These are questions that should bother product owners and occupy much more of their planning time than it'll often happen. Think about it. You've got an active dev team that's churning out new features nearly every month. The web interface for logging in and accessing your service changes with each update, but I'm betting the documentation doesn't change along with it. Do you speak with your users about where they're getting stuck, where they're experiencing pain when using your product? That's really important. But it would be even more valuable to get feedback from the users who in the end just give up. Otherwise, you're at risk of having to deal with survivorship bias. During the Second World War, the U.S. military hired academic mathematicians to analyze the state of damaged bombers that made it back to base. The goal was to compile a registry of locations on a bomber's body that sustained the most statistically frequent rates of damage during missions. Engineers would then figure out ways of toughening up the armor protection for those locations to increase survival rates. But statistician Abraham Wald disagreed. He noted that planes that made it back to base survived. They obviously didn't need extra armor protection. It was the planes that didn't make it back that interested Wald. By contrast, he suggested that engineers should add protective armor for just those spots that weren't showing up on returning bombers, because airplanes that were hit in those spots probably didn't come back. In our terms, we're not so interested in users who eventually figure things out, but the ones who give up, who never make it back home, so to speak. Those are the ones we'd really like to talk to find out why. That kind of feedback can lead to better documentation. Besides figuring out what problems most bother your users, your new documentation should also reflect how they'd like to consume their knowledge. Every company that spends millions of dollars liberally splashing video tutorials and even courses across their sites is making the assumption that many or even most users respond better to video. Well, I create training videos for a living, and I'm certainly not going to argue with the conventional wisdom. But I will say that video probably isn't king in every use case for every user. Take me as an example. Despite my professional connection to the medium, I can't remember the last time I slowed down to try to learn a new skill through a video. I'm that guy who finds the Getting Started page and visually scans for code snippets. In many cases, if I can't find what I'm after in less than 60 seconds, I'll probably move on. A whole 10-minute video? No chance. Okay, so the universe should be grateful that not everyone is like me. I happen to know that many people do respond well to video guides. But would that be the best choice for your specific product? And if it is, what kind of video? Do you need live-action screencasts, or would slides do the trick? How neatly will your videos fit into the larger documentation structure? How easy will it be to update your videos to keep up with changes? Finally, are videos worth the investment? What are the alternatives? Would blog posts, web pages, or even physical or ebooks work as well or better? Documentation is a difficult dragon to slay, and even when you finally get it right, the odds are things will have changed just enough to require a whole new round. I guess you can call most of the books, video courses, and articles I create documentation. Take a look and feel free to let me know what you think.